Second, why story? Stories generate empathy. As we listen and begin to relate to stories and the storytellers, our brains synthesize that neurochemical oxytocin, our empathy drug. Oxytocin tells us, among other things, that we should care about someone. It tells us if someone is a friend or a foe. It reassures us of our safety when we are with them. It helps us predict whether or not someone would in turn help us survive, which would then cause us to call them part of our tribe. The more of our tribe's member stories we experience, the more we put ourselves in their shoes. And obviously, the more oxytocin that our brains secrete. At the deepest physiological level, this all means that we care. There was some interesting research that came out in the years following the 9/11 tragedy, the attacks. Harvard-affiliated researchers put forth the idea that human emotion or consciousness can actually affect the physical world, including the Earth's magnetic field. More recently, we've begun to see neuroscience articles on brain syncing that occurs in communities or on teams when people interact. In this moment, people describe the experience as being in sync, or they may say, I see you, or they may say, I feel you, girl, I feel you, or they may simply give you a gesture. We're right here. Next, stories bring us together. Why story? They bring us together. It's hard to listen to and learn someone's story and then not feel connected to them. Again, a chemical release, oxytocin, helps us care. But interestingly, we don't need to necessarily share our own stories to build a relationship with someone. Sharing almost any story connects people. One could argue this is why going on a date to the movies, which on the surface may appear to be a terrible first date, may in fact be successful at creating connection. While both people are experiencing the story separately, it is in fact a shared experience. I recall, and this is going to age me, being an undergraduate student at UCLA and going on a date to the Fox Theater in Westwood to see Tom Hanks in Forrest Gump in 1994. To this day, I recall the conversations myself and my date shared afterwards and how that conversation connected us and helped us realize that we shared similar values about life. The sharing of story has always played a part in how humans survived as a species. Ultimately, humans needed to work together to survive. We had to hunt and prepare food, shelter, ultimately pass on lessons that were learned so that descendants could survive as well. Evolutionary biologists believe that the human brain developed the ability to tell stories, both imagine and dream them, about the same time as our ability to speak. Let's take a moment and consider timeline. 30,000 years ago in the mountains of southern France, cave dwellers. They used pigment to paint on walls with their hands. These paintings depicted the prehistoric period. They were visual stories representing humans' first attempts at communication. Then the Greeks. The ancient Greeks were also passionate about storytelling. For thousands of years, they preserved their stories through oral storytelling. And then, plus or minus 1000 BC, the idea to develop a written language began to gain support, and the Greeks ultimately became the first known civilization to develop writing and apply it to storytelling, a fact that my ex-husband, who himself is Greek, would never let me forget. Over the next several centuries, the art of the written word and storytelling evolved into cohesive works such as the Bible and everything by William Shakespeare. The Old Testament was written in 1300 BC, and it was filled with stories, myths, legends about kings and gods and prophets. They were stories with religious purpose that people could easily remember and tell others, thus spreading a message. William Shakespeare was an English-speaking writer, actor, and poet. 37 plays during his lifetime, including the obvious Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare's contributions to storytelling were vast. His work is so expansive because it's relatable to others, and to this day, he's the most performed playwright of all time. Not too long after, fairy tales. They started in France. intended to teach children about basic life lessons simply in a storytelling form. The newspaper came out in 1690, followed by in 1813, lithography allowed photographers to transpose negatives onto paper and create actual photographs. In 1939, the magical box was invented. It would soon become known as the television. The first television broadcast, your president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, on NBC. After that, RCA began to sell televisions, and they were telling stories. The first commercial arcade game, I believe this is Pong, created in 1971. Video games became the most popular medium for telling stories of the 20th and 21st centuries by presenting a player with a way to be in a story. A video game makes it possible to put oneself in the shoes of a character and experience adventures and journeys as if they were real. And this last one, social media. It provides access to see everyone's life without actually being there. The internet has created a space for blogs, posting pictures, event sharing. Social media has become the modern way we tell stories in our lives, a time capsule for all humankind. The evolution of storytelling reflects how people learn and communicate. Through both oral and written storytelling, storytellers' narrative voice remains the primary importance. What is the message and what are we to learn? Is it one of perseverance, inspiration, triumph? Though the mediums have changed, the core concept of using a sequence of events in an exciting narrative has remained the same. A good story will inspire us, make us think, and stick with us. The story itself helps us remember ideas in a way that simple text cannot. So why then is storytelling an essential leadership skill? The business landscape continues to change. As we discussed, organizational structures are flatter. Both the clients and the associates geographically dispersed everywhere. Shanghai even. Access to information has never been easier. And now more than any other time in our history, both clients and associates are tuned in to what is important. Many of them are asking themselves the question, why does the work that we're doing matter right now? In this uncertain environment, leaders need to influence and inspire others, and storytelling provides them the opportunity to do so. If done correctly, stories allow the storyteller to create an authentic, trustworthy, and compelling narrative, which is vital not only to the leader's success, but the organization's success as well. Storytelling can create tremendous value for the organization. So what are some of the key benefits? Storytelling allows you to highlight behaviors you want to encourage in teams. Storytelling allows us to make technical information and data much more memorable. Storytelling allows us to engage with your audience on a deeper level and share lessons and values that define your leadership. Storytelling helps persuade and motivate people to follow you. It also inspires others to take action. 3 leaders that arguably have the best storytelling skills currently: Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb; my favorite, Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla and many other organizations; and Patty McCord. She was the Chief Talent Officer at Netflix. Remember number 3 above in why story? Why do stories work? Stories bring us together. They create connection. Possibly the best example of using storytelling to build a brand and communicate a vision. All of them are good at this, but in particular, I think during the pandemic, Airbnb. Storytelling lies at the heart of Airbnb's marketing. Part of their storytelling focuses on both the people who own the homes listed and then likewise the travelers who go there. They show how connecting with others through compelling stories is important to their brand and interestingly to their potential customers. They focus on the stories and on the people, recognizing that this is the language by which humans communicate. So that is the approach that is going to attract more customers. So what makes a great story? It needs to be memorable. It needs to inform, share intellectually what we know. What is the data? What are the facts? 1 in 8 people, or 1 in 8 couples, I should say, struggle with infertility. 6.7 million people, I think it was, right? So share intellectually what we know. It needs to be relatable in order to be memorable. Communicate in a way that captures the attention of the audience. Use what makes you, you, right? Use that. And then finally, it needs to be novel. It needs to be new. And in being new, it'll stimulate and inspire imaginative curiosity. It'll get others thinking. It'll get your team thinking. The picture I used on my title page for the slide deck, recall the one of the girl in the high dive considering jumping off with her favorite duck floaty secured at her waist. It was actually the lead picture in an article from the Harvard Business Review this morning, actually, on the importance of leaders creating a psychologically safe environment for their teams to operate. Leaders do this by remaining in a posture of curiosity rather than in one of judgment. Good idea, bad idea. Good idea, bad idea. Likewise, sharing stories that are informing, relatable, and new, they also stimulate curiosity in our teams and in our people. When done well, the storyteller will move seamlessly between the 3 states naturally. So stories can be broken down into 3 sections. We know this: the problem, the journey, and the solution. The problem: what issues did you identify in your workplace, in your industry? What service or product was there a lack of? And then the journey: how did you go about researching a solution to the problem? And then finally, the solution: how will your product or service change the industry or solve the problem? Focus on the meaning and the lesson learned. The power of the story lies in finding the meaning in the moment. Often the story and the lesson learned, they turn out to be metaphors, like this one. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Perhaps one of the most well-known metaphors ever in filmmaking.